Hello everyone, we're back with Ian Anderson now. We're really transitioning this morning or this afternoon. Ian Anderson from the Designers Republic. We were just having a long chat right before this, so it was quite casual. I don't even know if you still need introduced, but you've been here at OFFF since Wednesday, Thursday. How has it been, and is it nice to be back in person? You said it's quite overwhelming to be with everyone again.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I used to travel probably, like fly somewhere probably every 2 or 3 weeks for like 15 years. And
Yeah.
so it just became something that was, it's just what I did, you know.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic came and I didn't travel anywhere. I mean, you know, I wasn't one of those people like, oh, I'm not going out of the house. I never
Yeah.
really felt like that. But you know, there was nowhere to go,
Yeah.
you know, or anything. And so actually this is the first time I've been abroad since 2000, March 2020.
Yeah. And
So
you're
yeah,
based in Sheffield, right? You were just telling
yeah. So
me.
I was born just outside London, and then I went, you know, lived in the southeast. But as soon as I went to university in Sheffield, just because I thought it would be a bit more real. It all felt a bit like in sort of commuter towns and things. It all felt a bit like Stepford Wives. So, you know, as an 18-year-old, I wanted to go somewhere that I thought was like more real.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up in Sheffield, and I mainly went to Sheffield because I liked the music from the city at the time, all the electronic stuff in the late 70s. So,
you probably get asked this question quite a lot, but you obviously were inspired and involved in the music scene quite a lot. Can you tell us a bit more about that and how you started?
I suppose I started. I was in a band when I was at school,
Yeah.
and because we were all right. We weren't particularly good, and we used to play things really fast because you're sort of young and you're kind of a bit nervous, the adrenaline, and so we kind of. I remember this article that said, that we were the first punk band in Bracknell, Newtown. So we did that, and then went to university and didn't really know what else to do apart from I formed a post-punk band.
Yep.
So I was in bands, but then the whole punk ethic kind of moved on, thankfully. But people started to become better at playing.
Yeah.
Whereas I was never really interested. I like being on stage, and I like doing the posters, and I liked everything about being in a band, apart from learning to play my instrument any better.
What instrument were you playing?
I played the bass, so you didn't have to be very good. You know
Okay.
what I mean? It's not in a punk band. I mean, as long as you could keep time, and you know. And I used to get the guitarist to show me where to put my fingers for this thing. So I didn't know the notes or the frets, but anyway.
At least you had someone else to, had your back.
Yeah, and and then so I finished with that.
Yeah.
And then I started running fanzines and doing music reviews for the university newspaper, etc. And then I started putting on club nights and promoting bands. So that was mainly kind of what I did.
Yeah. And how did you get into design then, and what changed?
Well, so there was a band in Sheffield called Person to Person that was made up of ex-ABC, shiny 80s pop band. They're made up of ex-members of ABC, and they asked me to manage them. Which I did, and we signed to Epic Records and put an album out produced by this system from New York. It was all like, but it was basically a pop band that wasn't popular.
Okay.
And so anyway, that kind of fell apart. But because I designed the flyers and everything, or I designed them, I did the flyers. I didn't have any design training, so I did philosophy. So I was basically sort of letter set and Pantone pens and photocopies and things. Anyway, they sort of said, why don't you design the covers for us? So I did that, and then basically as Person to Person's star waned, I'd met a lot of people, because I was young, there's a lot of A&R men, young sort of publicists and that. And we always used to hang out together, in clubs and that, and just going to see gigs, in London. And it just got that more people were asking me to design record covers. I mean, at that point, I still thought I was going to be like a super famous, super rich band manager.
So that was just on the side that you were kind of
I was doing the design. It
yeah.
was sort of fun. Then I realised actually, I preferred managing my own creativity than nursemaiding grown men.
And you were self-taught, right, in terms of designing?
Yeah, I mean, taught, if you like.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay,
but
that's
I
a
mean,
big word.
I mean, I think the beauty of it was that because I never planned to be a designer, and not, I mean, even like 3 or 4 years into Designers Republic, it was still like, well, we'll get found out eventually, and I'll do something else. Maybe I'll be a writer or I don't know, baker or something. So that sort of thing about sort of self-taught, I think, is it suggests that I kind of sat down and thought, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to teach myself all these things. But we basically only learned things on a need-to-know basis. So if I needed to do something, and we used to get students in from like local design colleges, to do placement, and basically we always used to learn more off them because they knew how, and they sort of said, why don't you use, computers? And we're like, oh right, okay,
We can do that,
right?
right?
That we'll go and get one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just knowledge accumulation.
Yeah.
But I think because from the very outset we were thrown right in at the deep end, and we were like, we had like 4 or 5 record covers on at any one time, and things. There's just sort of 2 of us, and so there was never time to really stop and think, I'm going to sit back and learn this software.
Yeah.
Which means whenever there's like new software comes along, I find it really difficult because it just seems to be this huge wall of information that you've got to deal with.
Yeah.
So like it took me about 4 years to kind of really become comfortable with InDesign.
Fair. Any other software you started using at the time, or was it just InDesign at first?
Well, I used freehand.
Okay.
And I've been... Illustrator always just seemed to be the wrong way around for me. And I think that's always the same, that people that like freehand, and even now, I still keep old laptops so that I can use freehand. Just because it's like, I'm kind of getting over the fact that Adobe mothballed freehand. But it's just, I genuinely, I think that now, I think freehand used to be better than Illustrator, but I think obviously Illustrator's had years and years on, and it's developed, and it's a much better program than freehand ever was, or whatever. But it still doesn't feel natural to me to do it, and sometimes, so I can use it, but I still think like in freehand, because that's what I sort of grew up with. And so if I need to do something quickly, it's just easier to do it in freehand.
Yeah, because you know it,
Yeah, and because I don't have time, like that thing about being self-taught, I don't really have the time. Yeah. If somebody, I think that I used to learn software with people coming in, and they say, oh, how do you do that? Oh, you do this, you do this. And I've kind of got to the point now where I just want to do stuff. I kind of don't.
Yeah, and get on with it. And I think there are generations and generations of students who are now learning Illustrator really, very early on, and you're also involved in university, so you probably see that firsthand.
Well, I mean, I think that the reality is that, I used to kind of talk, in talks, talk about sort of freehand and, and things like that. But it's pointless now because nobody, unless you're like my age, really remembers it.
Yeah.
So if there was a battle, it's been over for years.
Yeah.
So but as I say, it's, and I think as well, one of the other things for me is that I guess it partly because I didn't train to be a designer, so I just do this stuff, so I can do the problem solving, and I've always had people around me that can do the software bit better than me because they're younger and they grew up with software, whereas I'm still aware that I'm using a computer. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that, so Photoshop's brilliant, but one of the problems for me is that the more things that, as the technology develops, the more things that it can do. So for me, it's a little bit like when you get one of those really expensive watches that can do everything.
Fancy.
And I just want to know the time.
Yeah.
And but I mean, so it's not a criticism. It's just like, even though, I'm working on the latest sort of Photoshop software, I really only do the basics, and I really only do the basics that I could do at the beginning.
Yep.
But then again, that's that's kind of what I want it for.
Yeah, completely. And how did you get around to setting up the studio then? And you just talked about surrounding yourself with the right people. So where is it at now?
Well, now it's just me.
Yep.
And I work with like collaborators and freelancers. So Well, so we didn't really, again, I mean, we didn't really set a studio up. It started off with me and my friend who lived downstairs who was studying sculpture. He's quite, he was good at drawing, a guy called Nick Phillips. But we just started in my living room, in my flat, with a big drawing board because you needed somewhere to do something. So we never thought it was a studio. And then so this band, Person to Person, had a studio in Sheffield in an old factory. And they kind of had a rehearsal room there and they kept all their tour equipment. And then they kind of said, oh, why don't you can have our space as a studio because at least there'll be somebody there, you don't have to look after the equipment, but anyway. So we thought, there wasn't room for 2 drawing boards in my living room, so we thought, okay, we'll go there. And then sort of bit by bit, sort of people would come in and do a work placement or something and end up staying until we had about like 6 people. And that to me was the optimum size at the time. I always thought it was like 6-a-side football team.
Yeah.
And so that was it, but it just grew organically. And if we needed somebody else, we'd kind of, you'd find somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody. We never really advertised.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of grew and grew. And then we started working with sort of, corporates, and like Coca-Cola and that. And then you need to get more people because they're bigger projects. And then you need to and then bigger corporate kind of clients kind of want account managers to deal with. They don't want to have to deal with like creators going like,
so I
ended up having to get account managers, and it was just hideous for me. It was just really hideous, and I realised I was just doing bigger projects, bigger paid work to make enough money to pay for the people that I didn't really want to do, to pay the people who I didn't really want to be there. I mean, it wasn't anything personal, I just didn't want that many people there, really. Yeah. So then it went bust, it all went wrong. So then I kind of set up again, but I just set up with like 2 other people.
Yeah.
That basically, the structure was, I'm doing this, and I need people to help out, and the level of help, it got to the point that they were there for like 10 years. So it wasn't, they didn't just come and go like, oh, how can we help today? It was working together, but it was very much sort of about me, I guess, because I realized after I went bust in 2009, I realized that, everybody, I mean, because there was a whole thing about, do I change the name of the business, do this, that, and the other? And it was just like, I couldn't get away from the fact that even if I was Ian Anderson, it was Ian Anderson from Designers Republic. So in the end, I said, right,
stick with it. Yeah. And I think you've had this question in the past, but you've always been based in Sheffield. And I think, having also studied in the UK and been there for a long time, I know that London gets a lot of attraction for the creative scene. What's your feeling towards that? And I know you've never had a question of kind of going back or going, to that. There's a huge agency bubble and, a bunch of young creatives going there. What's your thoughts on it?
I think there's a lot of creatives going there, but I think that more than ever, there's a lot of young creatives setting up studios outside London now. Because you don't need to travel. When we set up, I was on the train, back and forth on the train. This was even before fax machines, so I mean, it was just like a phone call, and then we'd be going down to the Red Star office, British Rail office, old days. But and we'd be doing that all the time. Whereas now you don't really need to. But I mean, London's always going to be a draw in the UK because the UK is, England is very London-centric. So obviously that's where people are going to go. I think that when we started, there was although there were a lot of people wanted to work with us because we weren't based in London, and it seemed like, great, you're more independent. There was also a sense from bigger clients who kind of thought, well, if you're any good, you'd be in London. What are you doing in Sheffield? And I sort of just like, okay, we don't work with us, then that's fine.
Yeah, you just you'd lose that opportunity. Or,
and I think that's always been the case, really. That I'm really happy to work with anybody that wants to work with me, of any kind, whether it's a small band, label, or whether it's Coca-Cola or Gulbenkian Foundation or whatever. Do you know what I mean? I'm always happy to work with people if we've got some element of freedom. Where if people come to me for what I can do, then that's fine. So I mean, which is why we never went down the agency route, because Designers Republic has never been a service industry, you know, primarily. I mean, we give good service and all that, and I think that now, you know, it's a little bit like why I work on my own now, just because I don't want the hassle of having another studio, building another sort of business, you know. So, and now I work with the people who want to work with me, and those people for whom I can do something that I think's valuable to them, but myself. Do you know what I mean? And if I need other people, then I'll pull them in.
Yeah.
And
what kind of clients do you have, like in the last couple of years or recently, that you can tell us about?
There's all sorts of interesting things. There's there's a digital art gallery based out of California called Evo Art. So I did an identity for them and some work with them. There's ongoing work with, you know, sort of record labels like Warp and other sort of techno things. And I do a lot of work for labels. I mean, these aren't big labels, but I'm interested in them, like Arjuna and Runa Gramophone and things like that.
Yep.
Until recently, we rebranded the Gulbenkian Foundation in Lisbon, so we're still working with them. But obviously, because of the pandemic, you know, everything kind of shrinks down, and in some ways, kind of, I'd like to be involved still, but it is good now that they've got Portuguese designers, because it's, you know, it should be really. I mean, I still, you know, I kind of shot myself in the foot really, because I said you should work with more Portuguese designers, and they said, yeah, okay, bye.
Oh no.
So then all sorts of different things. So there's I've got some people that I know in Budapest. So one of them's a CRM consultancy, and I do sort of the work for them. They have events and things like that. And there's a link to an alcohol distillery called Injur in Hungary.
Yep.
And they're doing hand sanitizers. So it was really sort of, so that, you know, and they kind of said, don't suppose you want to do that. I'm just like, well, I never designed hand sanitizer. I never branded a hand sanitizer.
And quite relevant these days. So.
Well, exactly. So it was really an interesting to do.
Nice.
What else am I doing? Oh, there's all sorts of things. And what's quite nice is that for the pandemic, sort of people have contacted me, and it might have been work that I wouldn't have done kind of before, but now it's kind of interesting working with people that, you know, trust what I do, but it might not really be, you know, not the sort of thing that is particularly relevant to present here, you know.
Yeah.
So I've been doing those things, and then someone's twisted my arm to get me to do some NFTs.
Ooh, okay. So going forward now a little bit into technology. So NFTs.
NFTs.
Oh dear, it's a hot topic, isn't it? And I think from the first day we've heard this in pretty much every session. It was either 3D or NFTs. So topic of choice.
Well, NFTs. I mean, I've always had this kind of philosophy of communication by any means necessary. So I'm not particularly interested in web design, the technical side of it. I mean, I art direct quite a few websites, or conceptualize or consult on, you know, how you navigate them or different ways of doing them. But I'm just not interested in that technical side, or, you know. And Christoph asked me to write the intro for Age of Data.
Yeah. He's right down there, right?
Yeah.
At the entrance.
Yeah.
His stand is packed. From the first day, I saw everyone running towards him.
Yeah. So he asked me to write the introduction, but that's because it's not because I really do. I've got no work in the book.
Yeah.
But it's because, you know, Designers Republic, or me, Designers Republic has always like been informed by this idea of the future and what's next. Yeah. But you know, kind of beyond Blade Runner and other sort of sci-fi stuff. Do you know what I mean? I'm not particularly interested in sort of digital.
Yep.
I am interested, but I'm not interested in doing it. You know, it's a little bit like kind of decorating the house. I'm interested to have an input, but I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So, and NFT, so basically, it wasn't that I was I've never really been anti-NFTs. I just didn't know enough about them, and a lot of the kind of the anti sort of NFT stuff,
Movement.
is really kind of quite naive,
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm for saving the environment, but I just felt that kind of I need to do NFTs to find out about for myself. And if at the end of the day I think, no, I think it's a bad thing, then fine, I've learnt myself. But I don't just want to listen to like some like hive mind
Opinion.
on social media, especially when those opinions are so sort of, poorly expressed. They don't really explain, the whole thing. But then I kind of think, you're complaining about NFTs, etc., while you're streaming Netflix, and then you probably drive your car, and do you know what I mean? And so to me, it seems like a sort of a standoff, and some people taking position. But that's not to say that they're wrong. I don't know yet, so I'll find out for myself.
Yeah, and I think it's quite also bold to say, well, let's just stay tuned and try it out and make an opinion for ourselves. And
I don't. If I'm wrong, then
you'll come back and tell us.
I'll hold my hand up and go like, do you know what? You're right. I've just destroyed the planet. Sorry.
Yeah.
But I don't think. See, I'm just doing a limited series of 253 NFTs.
Okay.
I'm not doing multiples. I'm not doing these sorts of things. And I'm doing one for monotype. I've done like one for
nice.
various people.
Yeah.
But I mean, mine, I'm just doing so it's just one. You pay for it, and there's just 253, all different and whatever.
Yeah.
And they don't. A couple of them might animate, but they're not animations. It's just what Design Republic do, but as an NFT.
And Christoph is actually with us a bit later, so he's going to be talking about this. And if we, have any questions at home, let us know, because we'll be definitely picking at him and trying to get as much information as we can.
I mean, I spoke to him and Joel in the bar, I think, on Wednesday night. Anyway, and we were talking about NFTs, and I think that, Joel was much... she's more eloquent in terms of like what it really means and the technical impact and the environmental impact, So, and I think and Christoph as well. So I mean, I think that's where you'd, I don't want to be the person that says, well, I'm just a designer, I don't know, because I take more responsibility than that.
Yep.
But, I've got a friend of mine. We set a company up and he's doing everything. I'm just like, here's the artwork,
Yeah.
I'm just a designer. It's nice because I
you can also use that. Right?
Yeah, I can always hide behind that. Well, I'm just a designer.
I failed, but that's fine. Nice. So we just have portfolio reviews right after that. I think before we went live, we were talking a bit about how you've been involved with kind of younger folks as well, and around universities. What is that experience like? Is this something you're focusing on a little bit more recently? And what's your opinion on reviews?
Well, I mean, I think like a lot of creators, or certainly before the more digital age, most creatives are kind of protective about their processes and methods because that's what you live by.
Yep.
But now we're all kind of using pretty much the same software. It's really your ideas that make the difference, so you can share your process. So that side, and I don't know whether it's an age thing, or whether it's having kids, or whether it's that point where you doing the same thing over and over again effectively, but with different clients and different projects, but it's still pretty much the same. That it's actually really nice to share. And I started doing some workshops at Manchester School of Art for my friends David Crow and Jonathan Hitchin. And I really loved it. I just really loved the connection. I like the fact that although kind of understandably a lot of students are quite naive, relative to me because they're new, and that's why they're learning.
Yeah.
But actually, they have year on year, different sort of generations or micro generations have different takes on things and different opinions or different approaches or ways of dealing with, creative problems. And so it's not like I'm going to go there to kind of get ideas. but it is really interesting, this sort of just to be sort of regularly in contact with people that think differently to the way that I
Yep.
do.
Yep.
Because in terms of Designers Republic, obviously I kind of employed people who thought in a similar way to me, so that at least you've got some kind
Yep.
of forward planning or direction. But I really enjoy it. So I've been doing it Manchester. So I'm AL at Manchester, and I've been there I think for 12, 13 years now. And I'd also do it. I started doing it in Leeds, and maybe I'm doing Nottingham. But I'm open. I'm open to doing it anywhere.
Well, we're about to do it just now, so
Yeah.
we'll take a quick break and go on to our reviews and hopefully get some feedback from you as well.
Okay.
So thanks for joining us for a quick chat, and we'll be right there.
Okay. Bye.